All right. Hi, friend.
Hello. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm recording from my husband's armchair because it's been a hard week.
It has been a hard week.
And I need to acknowledge this blanket that is covered in cats. The word.
Oh. Okay.
Did I move it?
You moved your shoulder, and it made it look like the cat face was like coming to you.
Nope.
And okay.
They're two-dimensional flat cats, and
Can you tell that one is darker than the rest? Like
yeah, they're all different colors.
Let's just talk about the one that's closest to your.
This one? Isn't she cute?
Yes, she is cute, and she is closest to your ear, and she is the darkest of them. So the other is kind of blended in with the fireplace, but that one is like right here.
Yeah. So not real cats. It's the ugliest fabric I've ever seen, and my husband's favorite blanket that I made.
Well, you're the good wife. Good wife for making that ugly blanket.
Okay, so we recorded this video 2 weeks ago, and a lot has happened since.
A lot has transpired since that.
Yeah. So we just wanted to touch base about what's going on in the world, and this is actually a pretty appropriate story with people challenging the status quo.
Yeah, the societal norms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what expectations of the expectations that some people put on other people, challenging those expectations. Yeah.
Yes. And so we reflected, and I think it still has, and our guest Kritin really put a beautiful bow on the end of the story. But we just wanted to acknowledge and let you know that when we did this, a lot has happened since. It's not going to come up, but it definitely was something that helped us, I think, become learners over the last couple weeks, and like really engage and think about what our role is as an ally.
Yes. And that pushing boundaries, right? Pushing those boundaries is appropriate, right? And is the right thing. Yeah. I remember there's that we can be who we want to be, and don't have to be defined by what others say we should be or that we are.
Yes. And serving the world by helping others that are don't have the same rights is important as well.
Absolutely.
And that is all the women in this story still love with all of my heart.
So. Absolutely.
I think about them all the time since we did this.
Here you go. Our friend Phlli.
Thanks. Love you guys.
Love you guys. Bye.
I recorded a little while ago because I enjoyed where this was like heading. I thought it was a cool thing. So you work for the Brilliance Project, or I don't fully understand what the Brilliance Project is, I guess.
You are the Brilliance Project, right?
Yes. So okay. No, you are it. You don't work for it. Okay. Tell us about the Brilliance Project.
Basically, my trajectory was I started teaching kids who were kicked out of Denver Public High School at the beginning of my career. And then a couple years in, I started a middle school there because we had a grant, and kids were getting kicked out of middle school. It was not just an epidemic, at the high school setting. And then from there, and I taught an inner city classroom of 15 boys who were kicked out of middle school. So it was trial by fire. I think I cried every single day. It was December of 2016, and I was at Corwin for 4 years. And I found myself standing on a stage in front of 2,000 people because Corwin is part of SAGE. And SAGE is, you probably know them because they make your textbooks or the journals that you've ever used going through college. And so SAGE is headquartered in Thousand Oaks, and Corwin's a SAGE company. And I was standing on the stage because I had just been named Employee of the Year for all of SAGE and Corwin. And I was like queen of the world. They'd given me like 24 roses. It was like I just won Miss America, right? Standing there with like all this stuff. And, the president of SAGE is taking pictures with me. And I remember this thought vividly as I stood on the stage and said, this isn't for you anymore. Like you are alive for something else, which is really interesting because it's supposed to be something that's like, yes, I'm operating on all cylinders. I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And there was this feeling of there's something else for you, a greater purpose. So I started kind of just listening to that voice and exploring, because it used to be that the teacher was everything and the kid was the empty vessel and we just had to fill them. And instead, what we've been trying to do over the last 5 years especially is move from the kid not having power to the kid powering with the teacher to really own their own learning journey. To jump off a cliff from having a massive salary, a company car allowance, an assistant, the promise of writing books with John Hattie, massive bonus structure, all of these things, to not even having guaranteed health insurance. Like, I made the decision to quit it all, and I'm the breadwinner for my family. And I just felt like the purpose and the mission was so strong. And so it was interesting because I remember I was having a really hard time about it because not a lot of people around me were very supportive about it. Everybody in Corwin was very upset, and they gave me 8 different job offers to get me to stay. It was crazy. Even some of my family members were very much like, you're making the worst decision you could possibly make. And I just felt like the calling was so strong. And I remember one night I was sitting in my bed crying, and my son came in and he was like, why are you so upset? What's going on? And I said, I feel like I have a calling to do something, and it's going against what almost everybody else says I'm supposed to do, but it seems like this is what my life is supposed to be. What is my contribution? How can I empower people? He's like, well, Mom, if you're supposed to do it, you're supposed to do it. And yeah, it was amazing. And he's like, that's what your life is about. Everything else is going to work out just fine. And so then
Can I ask how old he was at the time?
He was 11. So, yeah. And so it was so meaningful. And I remember that moment very much. And then a couple weeks later, I decided to call my company the Brilliance Project, because if I could be successful, every educator around me would feel brilliant. Like they would discover their competencies and what they're capable of. And that's what that means. So then it was cool because I was telling my son about it, and he said, oh, Mom, I have an idea. And he said, what if the L's in brilliance were the filament of a light bulb, and educators would light up because of the work? So that's what the logo became. We registered.
Didn't Edison invent the light bulb?
Oh my gosh,
you were through the Edison schools. It was meant to be. I've had an emotional journey with this because it feels vulnerable, like we've been talking about, to like do this thing that Rochelle and I have loved doing, and then to bring people in to it, like it's.
She had to get out of her own head. I had to talk her down off the ledge. Like,
yeah, I was gonna quit. We were gonna cancel. I was like, can't do this. Not worth it. No one will like it.
We're not.
You know what though, that's so normal. Like I've even felt that way as I've been exploring my own work, and so one of the things I'm really into is self-efficacy of the teacher and the leader, and I am working on that in my PhD, because I truly believe that if we can get educators to believe in themselves, we can save the profession and see what they're capable of and take risks. And so when I look at you guys, I see people who are being efficacious, who are choosing to be dynamic, to take risks, to innovate and experiment, to put on your science coat and to say, I'm going to mix a little bit of this with a little bit of this and come up with a Netflix series of intrigue and see how it goes.
It started with a poem that I found about, well, I put it up on the slide so people can read, but I'll read it out loud too. All right. Hail the triumph of the corset. Hail the fair Philippa Fawcett. Victress in the fray, crown her queen of hydrostatics and of other mathematics. Wreathe her brow with bay. If you entertain objections to such things as conic sections, put them out of sight. Rather sing the essential beauty of differential calculus tonight. Worthy of our approbation, she who works out an equation, by whatever ruse, brighter than the rose of Sharon, are the beauties of the square on the hypotenuse. Curve and angle let her con, and parallelepipedon and parallelogram, few can equal, none can beat her at eliminating theta by the river Cam. May she increase in knowledge daily, till the great Professor Cayley owns himself surpassed, till the great Professor Salmon votes his own achievements gammon and admires the guest.
I don't think I've ever heard someone pronounce the word parallelepipedon.
Yeah, and you know what? I wish I'd practiced it out loud before this moment, because I got to it. I was like, crap, I read it, but I don't know how to say it. So of course I had to know, who is this person that has a math poem written about her, right? Like, who is this human being? Okay, so yeah, so, and it was written anonymously and wasn't titled, so I don't know who wrote it, I'll be honest. But okay, so our story, so this poem is about Philippa Fawcett, who we'll get to, but our story is actually going to start with 3 women. So Elizabeth, Agnes, and Millicent. So they were all sisters. They, oh, I forgot to pull up my notes, y'all. Oh gosh. Here. I got all excited about the poem. I forgot that I have like things to read. Okay. Let me pull this over here. All right. So they were born in the 1800s in England. They were all Garrett sisters, but they were actually 3 of 10 siblings. So there were 10 of them. And so the oldest is Elizabeth. She was born in 1836. The middle of the 3 girls was Angus. She was born in 1845. And the youngest was Millicent, who was born in 1847. Okay, so all beautiful. They're kind of far apart in age. So the mid-1800s in both countries was the beginning of the suffrage movement. In the U.S., 1850, so Millicent was born in 1847, so shortly, so they were kind of like born when all this was brewing. So 1850, that was when we had the National Women's Rights Convention that Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Sojourner Truth, so they were all there. And the same thing was actually happening in England. So they were starting to like brew this women's suffrage unit when these girls were young. So Newt and Garrett, who was their father, they were a really close family. He was super involved in politics, and he encouraged his kids to be well-read, speak their minds, and be politically active. So he was originally conservative and then moved to liberalism. Now, I'm not sure if conservatism and liberalism has the same meaning that it does today. Do you know how it switched? Like Abraham was, anyhow. So, and they loved good debates. So their family was often debating, and he was considered a strong patriot, like really politically active, raised his 10 children to be that way.
Wait, how many children was that? 10?
He had 10. So I only have information on the 3 girls, Elizabeth, Agnes, and Millicent. Okay, so at the same time, all this movement was happening in England as well as in the US. So kind of within 10 years, both where the women's suffrage movement was kind of raising up. In the US, of course, the Civil War paused the suffrage movement. So that was in the 1861 to 1865. And then in England, World War I paused. So they both had like these kind of wars they had to work through. Okay, so Elizabeth is the oldest sister. She was the first woman doctor in England. But she struggled to practice because she couldn't own property. She couldn't have anything. She didn't have any rights. So as a result of that, she started to get involved with Emily Davis, who is in the movie The Suffrage and is a real person. I mean, her herself. She's played by Meryl Streep. But anyway. So Elizabeth got involved because she was a practicing doctor, like good first woman doctor, but couldn't practice. They couldn't do anything, didn't have any land. So she got involved in the suffrage movement and introduced her sisters Agnes and Millicent to Emily, and they started to follow it up by getting involved as well. So she was 10 years their senior. So she was kind of like their guide in becoming involved. So Agnes wished to be an architect, but that wasn't considered suitable for women. Women could not be architects. So Agnes and her cousin Rhonda studied under this architect, learned how to do it, and then opened this thing called the Ladies Dwelling Company, which is, it was said, okay, so in one place it said it's an interior design company. Like that's what it said. But then if I went and found this book that they were mentioned in, and it was actually, they were led by women, it was ran by women, and they hired women as much as possible, and they actually built communal housing for women, like that they could live in. Yeah, but they called it an interior design company. And it's interesting where it's referenced in one place, but then when you read more about it, it was actually this different thing. Like, and it's interesting to see where it comes from. So Millicent, so she was the second youngest of all the 10, but and I'm unclear if the sibling younger than her is a sister or brother. I couldn't find that information. But Millicent was relatively young. She really gravitated towards the suffrage movement. Like she was really into that. And by the end of the 1800s and through 1919, so we got voting rights in 1920, right? So she worked through 1919 in England. And overall, she was considered like the leader of the movement in that time frame. Like she was at the forefront. She was, president of the National Women's, I didn't write down the name, but anyways, she was like the leader in that. One time she wrote, I cannot say I am a suffragist. I was always one from the time I was old enough to think at all about the principles of representative government. So she was just very, it's just who she viewed it as her mission. So she also had a really big, she believed in the educational opportunities for women. Like she wanted to make sure that women had the opportunities to be educated. She built a college, the Newham College, which was part of Cambridge. So she, built within that. Women could go to the Newham College, but could not get a degree from Cambridge. Ended up meeting a parliamentarian who was actually the guy that proposed most of the women's suffrage bills that allowed women to own property and all that. So it was John Stuart Mill. And he was a huge supporter of the movement, did a lot in the parliamentary to make it happen. So he introduced Millicent, to Henry Fawcett. Henry actually had intended to marry her sister Elizabeth years before, but Elizabeth decided to go to school and become a doctor instead. Henry and Millie had one daughter named Philippa, who our poem is about. So this is Philippa. Philippa, do you think it's Philippa or?
I'm not sure. Philippa?
Philippa?
What do you think, Kristen? Philippa?
It's like Philip with a PA. So Philippa?
When you said that, all I could think of was Dua Lipa. So I'm not quite clear. I've got Dua Lipa songs in my head now. So.
Yeah, right? I know. I was going to sing one, but all I have is Post Malone stuck in my head. I was listening to it right before you came.
You're running circles around your head?
Yeah, right. Well, actually, I was listening to Sunflower. I love that song. Okay, so they had two houses. Agnes and Millie kind of lived in this one with Millie's daughter, Philippa. How did we decide to say it?
However you want to.
I'm just going to call her Phlli. Can I just call her Phlli? We're going Millie and Phlli. Okay. Because I keep messing up the letters. Okay. So they had 5 young children, but Millie was always out and about, like doing stuff, right? So she wasn't really there that much. Okay, so Philly's birth in 1868 was actually not mentioned in her mother's autobiography.
Wow.
I did not mention her daughter's birth in her autobiography.
Wow.
All right, so there's reports saying that she was modest and despite her brilliance appeared normal. Like that was the word they used. Like normal. It's like, okay. I mean, I guess, I don't know. All right, so.
Brilliant and normal.
No, of course not. I mean, Kristen, you're brilliant and clearly normal. I don't know.
What is normal? What is normal?
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel like, it was just funny that someone wrote that. Like,
I know, that is funny.
All right, so in college, there's this thing called the Tripos examinations. So Rochelle, you are up, my friends.
I am up. Okay, my door is continuously getting knocked on, and so I apologize. Like, There's print. Anyways, okay. Family. So what is the tripos? So it's actually tripos is how it's pronounced. And it was at the University of Cambridge. It's an undergraduate examination that qualify an undergraduate for a bachelor's degree. And so what happened is actually, like when they're studying mathematics, they would say, oh, I'm reading for the mathematical tripos, or I'm reading for the English tripos. And it's interesting because you know how we have like majors and minors in university studies. They were very fairly focused. They just were like on one field, but then in general, the fields were interdisciplinary in nature already, but like you just studied this one field. And it's the math one is the oldest one at the university. But get this, okay. So from like 1780 to 1909, listen to what happens, okay. You had 16 papers that you had to complete, spread over 8 days, totaling 44.5 hours, and there were 211 questions. And they never like published the actual marks for the exam or the grades, but it says there's a reference to an exam in the 1860s where out of a total mark of 17,000, the senior wrangler, we'll get to like coaches and wranglers in a minute, but the senior wrangler achieved 7,634. So what is that? That's less than half, right? Yeah. And then the second one, the second person, the next step was 4,123. And then the lowest wrangler was about 1,500. And then there was other candidates that they were called the wooden spoon. I couldn't get over that. So they would have about 237. So 17,000 marks, and then the highest was 7,634. And then there was a lot of people that didn't make it. So coaches and wranglers. Like, okay, so not coaches wearing wranglers, but okay, so coaches. When I was like, all I was thinking is my middle school years. You know, I'm from Idaho, right? So I was like thinking of the crew in the parking lot wearing their, you know, that.
Oh, I love it.
So everybody that was like, so there was a list of wranglers. So the wranglers were the people that got the first class degree. So they were the ones that actually got the degree. And then they all had, they got a lot of public attention. And so they all had like coaches assigned to them. And I didn't go too much into the depth of like what the coach's role was or how they went to pick a coach or anything like that. But this is the funny part. So now think of like the coaches wearing wranglers. And part of the test was like getting up your stamina. Right? So how like your test of endurance, because so they would have them take brisk walks to build up their stamina. As the 19th century progressed, walking turned into athletics and other competitive sports, including rowing and swimming. So like as they're preparing for their exam, they're like becoming like more physically fit. But like this test dictated whether or not you got a degree.
And still does. Like it still does.
Ish. I mean, yes. I won't answer that definitive. I don't know enough to say yes. That's it. But yeah, they do have to have this because they have all their coursework they're doing as well. So
wow.
Yeah.
Pretty imagine writing 16 papers in 44 hours.
I know. It's kind of like yeah. I just was and to have enough like thinking that you could write something that was coherent, right? Like that makes sense. That's yeah. And what were they about? Math, equations. There's no equation editor back then to like write your like everything was, you know.
Oh, and with a quill.
Yeah.
Oh. They may have had pens by then, actually. I want it to be with a quill. I'm just gonna envision that.
I think that's appropriate.
I think that's appropriate. I also think this just goes to show we need to fact check ourselves later so we don't have
I prefer making things up. I think it's a blast. I was going to show a picture of Philippa real quick. Phlli, yeah. As we affectionately call her. Phlli. So wasn't she adorable? Oh, you can't see it yet. Sorry.
No, can't see it yet.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Isn't she cute?
Darling.
Cute.
Horrible. Anyways, okay.
So I'm going to say something else. So now that I know the story, I didn't know the story then, but now that I know the story, I might have another little tidbit I want to see where you're going. So.
Oh, well, I was going to share about how they read the results.
Oh yeah, do that.
Okay, so the men's, so they would like read the list of results, like public announcement, you know, like just like on a stage read this. So they would read the men's list, and they would start with like the senior wrangler who got the highest score. And then they would read the women's list, and they would say what they scored between on the men's list. So they would say, like, for example, this woman scored between the 8th and the 9th man. Like, so they would compare it. It was a separate list. And remember, women couldn't get degrees, so there was no point really for women to do it. But Rochelle, do you have the first woman that scored, that just ranked?
Yeah, so it says in 1880, Charlotte Angus Scott of Britain obtained special permission to take the tripos, and she came in 8th on the tripos of all students taking them, but due to her sex, the title of 8th Wrangler went to a male student. But then, interestingly enough, like at the ceremony, after they like announced the 7th Wrangler, all these students in the audience started like shouting her name.
Aww.
And she wasn't able to be there. So she like celebrated later somewhere else, but it's at a special ceremony, they sang the song "See the Conquering Hero Comes," like about her, which is like, I'm getting goosebumps. It's like, yeah. And then after that whole like debacle, I was so glad that people like kind of stood up. Then people were allowed to formally take the test, and then they were also, like you said, listed separately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then they were getting a special certificate instead of the BA. What? Like, so same requirements met, different outcome. Yeah.
Crazy.
I know.
And you know what was so interesting is that you were calling her Agnes or Angus instead of Agnes, and then Angus comes up. Like, that was foreshadong, I think.
It's spelled differently though. Yeah, but you're right. It is Agnes. Yeah, it's Angas. Angus. Yeah, it's still Angus, but yes.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know.
I think you did it on purpose.
The names are one of the hardest parts of this whole journey. I don't like how to say them.
It is a little true.
Okay, so that was in 1880 that Charlotte took it, right?
Yeah, 1880 okay. She took it, and remember, it was like special permission, and she wasn't like generally women were not taking it.
Yeah,
to even sit for the test.
So in 1890 is when our friend Phlli took it.
Yes, bring on Phlli.
Okay, so Phlli took it in 1890, and I just want to read what they said. So they read the men's list, and then the announcer read, Miss Philippa Garrett Fawcett, above senior wrangler. Just got goosebumps when I read that. Like, she was 13% higher than the highest man that year.
Wow.
Unbelievable. Like,
unbelievable.
So good. Okay, so her school, which was the Newnham School, which is the one that her mom created, right? Like her college. She got to go there, shock. But she did all right. So her school threw a huge party. They like carried her back to the building, and they sang for "She's a Jolly Good Fellow," like as they were carrying her back. I like that so many people sang like back then to celebrate.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
But okay, but at that time when she took it, she still wasn't able to get that.
Correct. She got a certificate and no bachelor's. Yes. So Mother Millie, that's what I'm going to call her now. So Mother Millie, of course, was aware of her growing role as a suffragette. So this is what she published about her daughter's achievement. The news on Saturday made me very happy. You will know that I care for it mainly for the sake of women. But of course, I also feel blessed in the fact that the thing I care about most of all has been helped on his way by my own dear child.
Oh.
No. Rochelle, she was saying the thing that she cares most of all was the suffrage movement, and her daughter helped it.
Oh, yes, got that. Okay.
I must have like spaced for a second because I was like, oh, it's coming back to like she actually like cares about her. No.
Okay, well, I'll be honest, the first time I read it, I was like, oh, she loves her child, and then I read it again. But of course, I also feel blessed in the fact that the thing I care for most of all has been helped on by my child.
Got it. Got it. Wow.
Mother Millie.
Mother Phlli.
Mother Millie. She wrote, it was called A Note on the Motion of Solids in a Liquid. So remember, she was kind of into physics, like she really liked the idea of like things going through gases and that kind of thing. So she wrote this, she was kind of early in the, like the study of things moving through fluid. So she took isotropic phylicoid, which is where you can like, it rotates onto itself at 2 right angles. So here's an example of one, like a sphere is an example. And I'll be honest, I actually couldn't really think of anything else besides a sphere that would do that. So that might be a good mathematical thing for us to explore. So if you rotate it twice at 90 degrees, it's onto itself.
Well, that would just mean it has a 180-degree rotation.
Yes.
So you
well,
could,
no, but yeah, I guess, yeah.
like a rectangle, right?
No, because I think it's saying that it has to do it at both 90 degrees. So it's not 90, it's at 90 and then at 90 again. So a square.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically anything that has 90-degree rotation then.
So a student noted in her presence with teaching, so this is a quote, that she had speed, concentration, and her infectious delight in what she was teaching, and also her patience with students who were trying their hardest.
Oh.
Isn't that like how teachers want to be described today?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, okay. The quote went on. She was ruthless towards mistakes and carelessness.
Oh.
My deepest debt to
And what? What was the last part? What was the last part again?
She was ruthless towards mistakes and carelessness. My deepest debt to her is her sense of unity of all truth, from the smallest detail to the highest we know. Yeah. So she sounds like a pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. So in 1901, so Mother Millie, was sent on a fact-finding mission to the British government in South Africa. So in the early 1900s is when the Second Anglo-Boer War was resulting. So that was between South Africa and the British, right? So this was, as the East India Company had created a port there to stop as they went to India. And so they were pausing there. And so they got in a war because of the discovery of diamonds and gold. And so the British ended up setting up concentration camps for the civilians, so to protect the women and children that lost their homes because of the war. So it was like a guerrilla warfare style, so it was kind of like pretty destructive, and like the British's response was more destructive, and so they had to set up these concentration camps to make sure that people were taken care of. And so Mother Millie was sent down there to check out and make sure everything was going okay.
Why would she get that role? That seems like...
She was political. She was involved in politics. She kind of had her hand in everything. Anyway, so our friend Phlli decided she was looking for more out of life than just being a lecturer. And so she decided to join her. So she quit lecturing and went with her mom to South Africa.
Did Phlli have a family?
No.
She was
I read her obituary. I read everything. Appears like she never got married, didn't have kids.
Well, she had all the students, right?
So she had all these students.
Yeah, and that's
yep,
huge.
Yeah. So anyway, so she went down with her mom to South Africa, and she fell in love. And when she came back, she requested a transfer from the British government to go down there, and she helped open the normal school. So I had to look this up. So the normal school is a school for teachers. Like that's what they did, is they taught teachers how to be teachers.
So in my hometown, there is a area called Normal Hill. There was a school there that now is the college. Like there's a college there.
Oh.
So Normal Hill Cemetery, but it was like the school on Normal Hill before that. I didn't know it was like, and it's just for teachers?
Yeah, so they taught teachers how to be teachers, and she wanted to go down there to help open schools in farming communities. And then in 1905, Mother Millie called her and said that there was a position at the London County Council, which was responsible for as an educational director. So that would be like building the schools in London and like improving them and that kind of thing. So even though our friend Phlli wasn't in the country, couldn't do an interview, she got the job. The Mother Millie strikes again. So in 1905, she went back to London. So now remember, while she had that degree, or not the degree, she got got that high score and got the certificate for the tripos. She didn't have a degree. She never got a degree. So like they weren't offering them to women. She didn't get one. So she became a part of what was called the Steamboat Ladies. So the Steamboat Ladies were in England, and they would get on a steamboat and drive across the channel to Dublin. So they'd go to Ireland, they go to Dublin. Dublin, the Trilogy College there, or the Trinity College, sorry, they gave degrees to women, and they would recognize, they would give them a degree to Cambridge, but through their school. So it was called an ad undem. I don't know how to speak Latin. I really need to learn how to say words if we're gonna do this thing.
How do you spell it?
So it's AD and then space EUNDEM.
Addendum.
Well with it.
Addendum.
Okay, so just a little bit about Trinity College. In 1907, they had granted 750 degrees to Steamboat Ladies.
Wow.
Like, that's so many. Like,
Sorry.
yeah, just taking on this thing that the others, that Cambridge wouldn't do. And so they took all that money that they got for like giving the degrees and stuff, and they created a hall of residence for women on their campus.
What?
I know!
That's awesome.
Secret heroes. She served for 30 years, and she's credited with developing relationships with the universities to the secondary schools to make that flow work, so to prepare kids at secondary level to colleges. And so and so that vertical alignment, and like she's credited in her obituary as crafting like the extraordinary reputations that the schools ended up having, these prep schools essentially. So our friend Phlli, even though she had this great mathematical prowess, she took this kind of servant approach of education and making it like possible for everyone, like working towards all that. So kind of a sad thing about Mother Millie, she died in 1929, which they had approved the act to make it so that women could vote, but she died 3 months before the first women's vote.
Oh,
Isn't that heartbreaking? Like, she had this whole life and this huge journey. And then, so our friend Phlli passed away in 1948, and so relatively shortly after her mom, actually, like pretty quick. But she, there was no mention of her having a partner or a family or anything.
Yeah.
So I just have one last quote from her obituary from one of her friends. So as a friend of Philippa Fawcett for 65 years, I long to say that though she's always been extolled for exceptional cleverness, it is with her rare humility and loving kindness which enabled her to be such a fine judge of character for her work at the London County Council. Her whole life suggests the thought, character is destiny.
I love it.
Isn't that cute? So that was by Miss C.L. Marson. Miss, by the way, M-I-S-S. So also never married.
Character is destiny. I love that so much. I'm going to use that. I'll tell you what for later, but I'm going to use that for something.
Something. Anyway, so that is the story of the Garrett sisters and our friend Phlli.
So Kristen, tell us your thoughts. What are you thinking?
Well, I feel like there's something that's really sticking out for me in this story is around the labels that we put on people and how those labels can be used to either rise above those labels or to let them control who we become. So, you know, these women all had societal norms of what a woman was supposed to be, what a woman was supposed to do. And yet every woman that came out of that family, those 3 women we highlighted and the children that came from them, all pushed the norms and the boundaries of what was expected of them, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, they became mathematicians, they became heads of school, they started schools to help people become better teachers, they worked on women's rights and voting, and they made a different world possible because of what they knew in their heart could be. And I think about the students that are listening to this beautiful story right now, and I think about the labels that probably have been put on them in their life at different times, you know, of something you can't do, or something that you're not, or something that your position in the world should be. And a label is just another person's way of putting something in a box and making sense of it, but it's not what defines us, right? What defines us is what we want to be and the mission we want to live and the good trouble we want to cause. And so nothing is bigger than the power of you and what you can do. And to me, that says everything. There's literally nothing you cannot do with your life if you feel called to live and fulfill that mission and that purpose. And so whether that's advocating for people, whether that is creating opportunities and being the first in your family to do something, or being the first in your race to do something, or whatever the case is, I think that this is a powerful lesson through mathematics of the power of humans in general. And the fact that even our past experiences don't define us, it's what's ahead of us and the choices we make and who we choose to be, that does.
Okay. Can we just like mic drop there? That was amazing. Kristen, your insight is so outstanding. And you kind of embody this as well, with you like stepping off that stage with this like bouquet of roses and think, this is not it for me. Like this isn't right. And
I was talking about her getting the top senior wrangler and then just leaving and working for a year and lecturing, like I literally thought about it, and I didn't know that part of your story. I was like, wow, like this is like
there's so many parallels, but you know, it's and when you make the choice to step out against controversy, or when people aren't necessarily in support of your journey, right? There's always fear that's associated with it. And it's important to know that. So students, if you have something that you really believe in or something that you want to achieve, when you make a brave decision to stand up for it, or to become it, or to rise above a circumstance and choose to be better than it, it doesn't mean that you're not afraid. We are afraid of what people think of us. We are afraid of failure. We can be afraid of judgment, all kinds of different types of fears. But Brene Brown says it beautifully when she says, courage is being brave and afraid at the same time. And if you don't think these women were afraid in pushing in a man's world, I am guessing every single minute they were, right? I mean, taking a test that only men were supposed to take, seeing where you ranked among men who defined the rankings, all of the, political things, sending a woman by herself with her daughter to South Africa during a time of war and brutal guerrilla warfare. I mean, there had to be massive fear, but the mission and the calling and who they wanted to be transformed or superseded that fear. And I think that that's being attuned to that. sometimes we let people convince us that our dreams or our goals or things that we want for ourselves are either selfish or they're not right. And if it is a calling, it is what gets you through all of those scary times, or whatever the case is. You know, like I'm thinking even now about something that's happened over this last week with the officer brutality of, you know, African Americans in Minneapolis. And I think about how there are defined roles or labels for people still in our society, and those are not okay, because we know that any person is able to achieve anything. And whatever you want to fight for, kids, you fight for it.
Fight for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And part of that is like asking the question, right? Stepping out of what you know and asking questions and finding out what you believe, right?
Well, and like you were saying, there was a voice, like you had a voice, and you had to like and it takes time to listen to it, like, because it said it took you a couple months, right?
Absolutely. You have to pay attention to the voice and ask questions about the voice. Also, at the same time, you have to be aware of the other voice, because I know every time I get an idea toward a calling or to pursue something or to be brave, there's all the voices in my head that tell me why I shouldn't do it. Right. And it's mitigating those voices. So for these women, you know, they might have had the voices of saying, you're not supposed to hang in a world of math with men. You are not supposed to be in politics, whatever the case is. But the brave voice, the voice of living the mission, had to be greater than those other voices in order to keep going for it. So you could say to yourself, I'm only 16. I can't do X, Y, and Z. Or no one in my family has ever done this, this, and this. And those can be the excuse voices. But we have to cultivate and listen to the mission voice that really helps define who we are and what we stand for.
Ah, I love it. I'm like getting like so excited.
No, I got some more tears. I knew I was gonna cry today. I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah, like we're in a special place where we teach is a special place, and I believe our kids believe that we believe in them, and that this message that you're saying, Kristen, is like kind of parallels like what I feel like we try to instill in them as humans, and then also as mathematicians. You know, just that you are better than whatever someone has told you that you are, or the circumstances that you come from, or the decisions that you've made in the past. That's not who you, they might have helped you get where you are, but that's not who you have to be. You can be who you want to be.
Yep.
With that song, I know I can do that.
Don't sing too much so we don't have to worry about licensing.
Oh, sorry.
That's been one of my lessons of the last couple weeks. I also think it instilled, so one of the meltdowns I had a couple recordings ago with Rochelle was about being a mathematician. Like, I don't label myself as a mathematician. And I would label our friend Phlli as a mathematician, even though she's doing the same thing I'm doing. She left math and went to educate. Do you know what I mean? And so it was like a good, I know I lost my sticky note. I am a mathematician.
Put them on our
so I think it was, and again, that idea of labels and like what they mean, like it was just I had a moment of seeing myself in Phlli. And
yeah. I just have to say, the research that you guys did, the story that you found, I mean, quotes from the obituary, finding all of these very cool links and tracking the history. Math is so much greater than numbers. It's about the people that make it up and their triumphs and what they're capable of. And you've made me love math much more, just as a notion. Because right now for my doctoral class, I'm taking statistics and all about formulas and plugging numbers and codes. And there's none of this human side. And yet that's why we are engaged in learning the math, because I want to know why it's relevant to me and I want to know what it's good for and what the story is behind it. So your kids are so lucky to have you guys as teachers. And I know all of you watching this know that very much. So
thank you.
Well, thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
This was what I needed today.
Yeah.
Me too. I feel so empowered.
Well, we're gonna continue this journey, and we'll have to make sure that you're along for the ride with us.
All right. Well, thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
We appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you so much.
been gone. Picture this in our minds, does exist. Visualize all of this.